Hello and welcome back to Massalia Tales. In the previous episode, the whole thing was dedicated to the giant battle going on at Iska. It's Heracles and his forces along with the garrison fighting against a massive Iceni attack. We were being harassed from behind by constant streams of reinforcements, particularly lighter forces. I tried to drive them off with chariots, but that did not work. Eventually, after a long battle behind the lines, where most of our lighter forces had to be sacrificed in Pyrrhic engagements, we were able to stop the enemy's reinforcements and take total control of the area outside the town. But during that time, the town itself was pretty much overrun by the enemy. Now only a few men defend the interior of the settlement against overwhelming odds, distracting those forces from Heracles, who with the remainder of his army is trying to break through to stage a rear attack on the Iceni's main position. Both sides have taken heavy losses so far in the engagement, but it seems Heracles is starting to get the upper hand locally. Both sides of the Battle of Iska fought with brutal determination. This is most likely because everyone involved felt that there would be no peace in defeat. For the Iceni, the Massalians were would-be invaders, under whom no life was tolerable. For the Massalians, they were so far from home and reinforcement that no retreat was possible, and to surrender would only be to increase the degree of torture the Iceni would inflict upon them. Every warrior was fighting to their last breath, and resultantly the casualty rate on both sides was extreme, even with the battle still undecided as the day drew to a close. The town, with most of its people dead, was blockaded by piles of bodies, and walked by the exhausted living still with missions to complete. So welcome back to the great grind at Iska, where both sides are fighting each other with very few of their forces remaining. The enemy have had an advantage the entire time, and they still do, but we've denied the enemy the chance to extend their advantage. So a key aspect of the fighting is the fact that one unit is basically holding up the majority of the enemy's army right now, while Heracles' other men are fighting with isolated pockets of the enemy in order to surround and defeat them separately. So I'm relying on these spearmen to resist the entire enemy force in the interior of the town, so they can't come out and engage with the rest of my troops. The problem, of course, is that the enemy's numerical advantage is allowing them to surround me. They surrounded the spearmen on three sides. I decided to pull out some legionaries from the main body of my army to counter-surround part of the enemy, and you can see it's having an effect on their morale there immediately. So while they're holding off there, with Heracles moving in to help, we're going to defeat the units behind them, and one unit is defeated at this moment. But now comes a key disaster. This lighter unit shatters into the back of my spears. My spears believe they're being attacked from the rear because the enemy are trying to break through like this, and they shatter as well. So routing the enemy caused a chain rout among my own troops, losing one of my most powerful regiments at this point in the battle, a devastating move which means my screen stopping the enemy from coming against me with their full force has now been severely weakened. It's just the swordsman I sent in as a reserve. At least the good news is that the pikes behind the lines there have now got the enemy surrounded, and there aren't too many enemies left there, so soon we'll hopefully free up those troops to form a more coherent formation while my swords try to hold off the rest of the enemy army. Heracles himself is going to focus on the back here, cycle charging with his guards the remaining enemy troops, and here you can see a cycle charge combined with infantry attacks on both sides of this unit of noble swords finally manages to defeat it after a long battle. So the back of our lines is now clearing up. We're going to be able to deploy these forces against the enemy's remaining bulk. The problem, of course, being the enemy's force is still more powerful than ours, so in a straight engagement that might not go our way. We need to try and arrange things carefully to make sure things actually end up going in our favour here. So the pikes are going to try and hit the enemy in the flank. Heracles is going to inspire our troops, and you might also remember we've got pelters who are trying to break through at the back of the town. Originally they were just fighting with the enemy's force wholesale to distract them. Now they have a chance to actually fight through this one enemy unit and reach the enemy's rear. I've got two squads of pelters doing this. The first one has almost lost, but the second one will be able to move in when they fall to continue the work. With any luck they'll be able to get through quickly, because at the main engagement we're about to lose another unit of our legionaries who are fighting totally surrounded. I'm pouring in with my own troops to try and stop them from routing. Unfortunately, an enemy unit is coming back from routing at this point, exactly what we don't want to see at this stage in the battle. Heracleides manages to prevent a flank attack on my pikes who are trying to move up. The enemy very cleverly using the infantry to rush around my pikes before they got in formation attacking the flank, but Heracleides and his men charged them repeatedly, managed to force them away so they can get back into position. Now we face a very dangerous situation here, because that unit that came back from routing, the enemy unit, had javelins left, and instead of attacking the flank of my position, they rushed through along an exposed edge and threw a volley into Heracleides' unit, killing half of his men at this stage. He almost dies and manages to escape with a few of his guards still alive. That was a very close fall. If it hit Heracleides, I think there's a decent chance our force would have routed. But with Heracleides driven away, the enemy now attacking our flank, which is none too useful, but being a unit that returned from routing, it itself was defeated quite rapidly by the fighting power of my troops. I'm basically just relying on that fighting power now to win out. A complete open melee, the formation's messed up, my pike phalanx are unable to form up because the enemy are pressing so hard into our formation, so they're not doing any good, you can see at the back there. Overall, it's just a bloodbath. We need to get around behind them to have any chance of causing morale shocks, and eventually I do manage to do that with those pelters who made it through. So I've got one unit of pelters hitting the rear of the enemy's massed formation. I hope that this would have a decisive effect on the battle, but as it turns out, it didn't really do anything. It wasn't enough to rout enemy units, and I couldn't leave them in the fight because they would be defeated in melee. So I decided I was going to try and do some form of cycle charge tactic with the pelters, even though it's not going to make a huge difference because we know a single charge can't rout the enemy. We do though also have dog handlers to spare. All of the dogs are killed at this point, but the dog handlers are still relatively able swordsmen, and they're able to make an attack on one of the enemy's other flanks. Here there was a smaller unit with its rear exposed, so I was hoping a rear attack would have a more devastating effect because the smaller unit was much more likely to rout. So the dog handlers rush in, immediately killing enemies. They are surprisingly good in melee, these dog handlers. And actually they do manage to rout one of the enemy's medium infantry units, which is fantastic. So they're now moving out. It's tempting a nearby unit to rout, a light spear unit which has almost all of its men dead, over 90% casualties among those light spears, but they're still fighting, they're exhausted, only wavering. You would have expected them to go a long time ago, but the enemy's commander is in there with them, and they have a really high level commander in this battle. So with those forces routing, I can now deploy my pelters to try and defeat the routing units to make sure they wouldn't be able to come back. And with that assured, with those routing units basically just taken off my mind, things are now looking okay. The balance bar is evening out. The numbers are actually starting to slightly favour us, so in a straight slog, we're actually going to start to win. And eventually, it all just suddenly happens at one moment. The enemy all rout at once, finally exhausted of the fight, and seeing that we were just starting to get an advantage, even with all of our troops lost basically. The battle ends in a costly victory for Heracleides, with Heracleides himself staying alive. To the great minds of the Timucoi, I write to report a victory over your designated target, the Iceni people of Britannia. A host of all their known warriors was routed at Iska. Loss of life was great. I request immediate reinforcement in order to ensure the safety of our ports. The local militia were lost. Fresh officers and equipment are required to re-establish control. Eustchus and the heralds are reported to have failed to engage the enemy. I shall determine the cause of this failure as soon as I am able, for it was no doubt the death blow to many a fine soldier. Not that I imagine for one moment you are concerned with the state of the soldiers. I will report further when your orders to subdue the Iceni have been completed. So after an enormous struggle, victory is ours with losses enormous on both sides. The enemy lost around 80% of their troops, we lost around 65% of our forces. A Pyrrhic victory by any means. In Heracleides' force, no one unit was actually destroyed, which means he's going to get all those troops back quite rapidly because he has giant replenishment. Only one boat lost as well. A lot of the garrison lost, but that's not all that important. While on the enemy's side, their losses managed to take their units down below the threshold for being wiped out in many cases. So this means that although both sides took enormous losses, we have the advantage coming off of this. Because not only are we in the end turn sequence, so we'll get some of our troops back, we'll probably be at half strength in the next turn, but 2 or 3 turns in the future, we'll be at full strength again, and the enemy aren't going to be able to train up such an elite army in that time. So, the result of this victory will mean we now have momentum in this conflict, and soon we'll be able to make an advance against the enemy, knowing we're stronger. So the survivors all retreat. All of the enemy's generals survived the battle, actually, so we're going to have to hunt those guys down and take them out because they're really high-level troops. Now, as we move on, the Sakarauka over in the east want a peace treaty. We have them blockaded right now and are waiting for Archibosphorus to make an attack. And as someone rightly pointed out, I need to end the blockade to make that happen, so I'm going to do that soon. I was willing to see if they would make any kind of interesting deals for peace, but not really. They regarded our empires as being equal and wanted only a white peace, so that was thrown out the window, of course. And now we have a significantly easier battle that suddenly comes up. This is with Artemios and the daemons of Polymus, who are besieging Petra Dava of the Catiaroi. The defenders sally out because they're out of food, and you can see they're already weak from the siege. This is the sort of situation I thought I could auto-resolve, but the losses were not acceptable, especially for the daemons, because they can't afford to lose all the experience they would be losing by replenishing the troops they'll lose in this battle. So we're going to really quickly do this battle. This was quite a refreshing engagement considering the stress of the last battle, a battle where I'm almost definitely going to win this time. So we started off with a skirmish. The enemy are mostly archers and horse archers in their army, so we're just going to skirmish against them. The enemy probably do have a skirmish advantage, but they don't use it very well. They mostly fire on the heavy infantry, who of course aren't really killed by arrows because of their shields and heavy armor. So our skirmishers stay alive and are able to inflict damage on the enemy. They have a few melee units which they just charge into the centre. They of course are going to charge into a phalanx, which isn't going to go well for them. One interesting point on the battle was on the far right hand side, where the enemy's horse archers were actually engaging with my skirmishers, and I was finding it quite hard to take the enemy down. These horse archers were actually quite good, especially here right on the edge, where you can see I got 2 units to throw javelins at the enemy, and it really doesn't do anything. You see the javelins just stick in them. It seems to take about 4 javelin hits to bring down a horse archer. Their health is very high, and probably even more when it comes to arrows, so that's why they're not being too affected by my return archer fire. But it doesn't really make a massive difference because we have the cavalry advantage. You can see I'm already surrounding them from behind. We're just going to wipe out all their foot archers, and then the rest of my skirmishers can focus on trying to bring down those horse archers. I can't advance against them, of course, because they'll just run away. So soon enough, we wipe out the rest of the enemy's army, the few remaining horse archers, and are cut down by massive volleys of arrow fire from my entire army. It's a decisive victory. That was a nice easy one, wasn't it? Much better than the previous battle. We lost pretty much nothing and have taken a settlement. This means the Catiaroi, our enemy in the east, are almost defeated. They only have 1 settlement left, and it's quite far away from Artemios' current position, so they're very unlikely to pose any further threat. Their garrison is wiped out. We're going to enslave the few captives we took, and that is going to mean at the end of this end turn sequence we take the town because they have been starved out. Also, the daemons of Polymus level up from that engagement, reaching level 8, getting very strong, this army indeed. So the settlement is ours. We're going to have to try and manage it carefully because we don't control any of this region. Luckily, Sparta controls part of it, which means it has Hellenic influence coming in, which will help us out quite a bit. Now, back in Britannia, we can look at how our armies are composed after that battle. You can see it's not all that bad, actually. Many of them back to half strength, and of course, the Hells of Massalia are at full strength because they didn't take part in the battle, which, although annoying for that battle, right now means we have an opportunity to do some damage against the enemy. For Heraclides, I wanted him to stay behind and replenish. He wasn't going to pursue the enemy or anything like that, but Eustchus can. We start engaging the small bands of enemies, and this is especially important because the enemy's officers are in here. You can see this ridiculously high-level general here with just a few troops guarding him, so we're going to come in and just take them out. So these are going to be some easy victories for Eustchus, which is good because he hasn't really fought in any battles. He doesn't really have any experience, so taking out these guys is going to start giving his army some experience and, more importantly, him some experience. More high-level officers to kill over here in the Welsh area. We're going to cut them down with another auto-resolve. So after these 2 battles, we've pretty much wiped out the leadership of the Iceni tribe as we know it. We don't know if they have more than the 3 armies that we saw, but it seems unlikely because they probably would have brought them down to engage with us. So we are most likely free to move both into Wales and eastward towards the enemy's capital once we have the forces to do so. Right now we're just going to wait through winter and see what happens, and then we'll be able to organise an attacking campaign. I was so eager to attack Camulodunum that I actually decided Heraclides was going to fortify in a dangerous position on the border. We haven't scouted the area, so we don't know if there's more Iceni out there, but I'm just assuming there aren't at this stage. We'll fortify the border, we'll get one more turn of replenishment, getting our army a bit stronger, and then perhaps it'll be in a condition where I feel like going to make a quick siege attack to try and overcome the garrison inside and take that key region in Britannia, because at least from there, even if we have to go to peace immediately afterwards, we've made an important gain. Now, speaking of peace, the Iceni come to me offering white peace at the end of the turn. I was going to offer them my usual client-state deal. They turned it down. I have the advantage in this war. It's time to get some rewards rather than peace. Never has there been so great a gift to me than the news of the enemy withdrawal. I learned that Iska remained standing, with noble Heraclides riding as a hero over a victorious battlefield. Say what you will of the horrors of war, but such moving moments are never granted in peace. We tracked the survivors for several weeks, finding 3 small bands of Iceni trying to return home. They were clearly scarred beyond recognition by the fighting, but I had orders to eliminate any threats I found. In each group I selected the leader and a handful of volunteers from their ranks who expressed a strong desire to stay with him. The rest were allowed to march on. When they were out of sight, we slit the throats of the captives. None of them expected anything different. So now in the spring, when we take a look at Heraclides' army, you can see it's basically back to full strength. Our replenishment is absolutely insane. You might know that I don't really like these replenishment systems, and this is sort of the reason why. It seems a little bit unfair in the Iceni for us to be suddenly back to our elite full strength after having lost so many troops, but at least the Iceni have this going for them. The garrison army in Camulodunum is absolutely giant and has an advantage over us, in fact. So we're not going to be able to make the sneaky attack I was initially thinking of. We're going to try and siege them out, because I think I would be able to beat that army in a field battle. I'm also sending over a new champion, a hero I've just recruited, to train Heraclides' troops, so they'll be at a higher level for future battles. Meanwhile, Eustchus, I thought he would just rush east and take Moridanon off the Iceni, but it turns out there's another army there, and yet again it's led by a massively high-level commander, so it's going to be a really buffed army as well. So this turns things around. Eustchus moves back to get away from the garrison. He's almost definitely going to be attacked by that full stack, but at least where he is now, the garrison of the town won't get involved. We don't know very much about this army. We can guess it's somewhat similar to the ones we've already seen though, so Eustchus could be in trouble in the wrong situation. The Iceni rethink the idea of being my client state in the end turn sequence. They offer clienthood in exchange for a payment which I can easily afford, so I could take this, but we're on the brink, I think, of taking some Iceni lands, and then perhaps client state will be nice after that, once we've taken some control of the area. And as expected, Eustchus immediately faces the enemy army marching out against him. The enemy have the advantage, and we can see now that they have various heavy infantry units, including heavy axemen and tons of skirmish units. They attack again as I attempt to escape, so we're going to have to fight them. They have a lot of the skirmish spearmen that we saw in the previous battle against the Iceni. We do have 4 units of cavalry, 5 if you include Eustchus himself, so we have the ability to go and attack those skirmishers, but their sheer numbers will make it hard to get them all, especially because we know they're quite slow to defeat because they're heavy in melee. They also have annoying units like Jav Cav and Light Cav who we're going to have to keep an eye on. Their main infantry line probably isn't superior to our own. We have some legionaries in our force who should be able to fight with the enemy's heavy infantry, so on the straight part of the engagement that should be fine. I've got a good defensive position too. You can see I've set up with spearmen and giant caltrops on the left flank to defend against cavalry. In the front I've got the archers and javelineers ready to attack. There's flaming tar pits and these great balls of fire that we can push down the hill against the enemy as they advance. And on another hill, over here on my right flank, I've got more spearmen ready along with cavalry. So I've got a sort of split deployment going on here, with cavalry on the extreme edges of the battlefield and 2 hilled positions to defend. As they advance on my main position, I've got some ballistas that can start firing on the enemy. The enemy have these big, relatively loose formations that are easy to hit, so right now our artillery is going to be especially effective. We're going to get, I think, over 100 kills before the enemy actually reaches our lines. And you can see the enemy's lines are insanely wide in terms of skirmishers, a huge amount of skirmishers. They do have more melee units than we can see right now because a lot of their units are hidden, including their Jav Cav who are just starting to come into view there. So their army advances up towards us, and when they get close, it's time to deploy the fireballs. I advance these Germanic auxiliary archers to do the work. The fireballs ignite the tar pits as they go through, only a couple of them. I wasn't going to bother igniting the rest of the pits because it'd probably kill just as many of my own men as the enemy. But the fireballs do amazing damage. They rush through the enemy's army, going through multiple regiments in most cases, and getting loads of kills against the enemy. A fantastic start to the battle with the fireballs there. So now the enemy are going to start making their attack up the hill. I'm peppering them with jabs and arrows as they do it. Here on my left, you can see I wasn't paying full attention because there's an enemy light cavalry unit sneaking around behind my spearmen. Not ideal, but at this stage they actually come in to attack my spearmen from the rear, and that's not really going to help because my spearmen are so disciplined that a light cavalry charge doesn't phase them. So now their cav are just fighting with my spearmen, which is to my advantage. The rest of the enemy are almost up the hill. I'm being a little bit slow in pulling the skirmishers back and putting the legionaries forwards. The enemy are throwing javelins forwards to hit my men, but the ballista are actually blocking half of the shots, which is handy for me. So the legionaries just about get forward in time to stop the ballista from being overrun, and now they're going to engage in straight sword battles where I think I have an advantage, although the enemy are upgraded and leveled up, so it might not be as big an advantage as I would like. We're also engaging the enemy's missile cav in melee, and my cavalry are hitting their skirmishers. Overall, the battle has started off quite well. I think I listened to them too much. They asked constantly to march this way or that, and now, with the excitement of the battle past, they're immediately calling for a campaign north to find more fights. And well, I don't really feel like I can say differently. I want to return to Massalia at this point, but to even say that, I think it would be dangerous. I am the leader of these men in name only. They will accept no leader truly until Eustchus rises from the dead. They have nothing to go home to, these men. You don't make it to the Daemons without a life of hardship. They live for the glory, for the fact that their reputation precedes them in every town. I think our expedition will not end until the Daemons end. The cavalry attacks on the skirmishers actually proved to be a little bit disappointing. We managed to catch them and get them into melee, of course, but once we were there, nothing seemed to happen. The enemy numbers didn't dwindle, their morale was not broken, so now our cavalry were just stuck in melee with units that are actually okay against cavalry. It's those damn spear-wielding skirmishers again who've been troubling us so much. So our cavalry try to stay in melee and inflict casualties because we are killing them faster than we're losing horses, but it's not enough to break their morale or anything like that. Here you can see their general is giving close support to their skirmishers, throwing javelins at my cav. Whilst up on the hill, things are relatively okay. The enemy infantry just fighting against the front line, fighting against legionaries, a fight they'll lose eventually, plus there's arrows raining down all over the place. We've got several units of archers peppering the enemy, and javelineers theoretically helping out, although throwing their javelins very slowly. When they do throw though, they're extra deadly, throwing right over the top, nice arcs into the enemy's ranks, easy to hit, so the enemy's numbers are going to drop very fast, whereas ours should be fine. So now out on the left flank, we defeated the enemy's cavalry attack with their light cavalry. Their jav cav were driven right to the edge of the map by my thorax hoplites, who actually lost a lot of their men chasing them, but now that they're trapped, they're going to get revenge. On top of the hill, the first enemy units are starting to rout, meaning my ranged units can switch targets to start peppering other units and whittling them down. Now, my cavalry attack on the enemy skirmishers has at this point been declared a failure. I decided to pull out of all engagements, and you can see most of these units actually didn't really lose anything, while our cavalry did take losses, and the morale of our cavalry was dropping as well. Overall, the attack on the enemy skirmishers with cav was completely unsuccessful. Here on the right, the enemy's Jav Cav finally decided to stop fighting in melee, having not lost many men, and they're now going to skirmish with this unit of hoplites. That would go very badly for me, so I'm going to bring in these cavalry to just chase the Jav Cav away from the battle entirely. The enemy's general has come up on top of the hill to inspire his men, but it's too late, many of his troops already falling back. You can see I've switched to shooting fire arrows into the enemy's ranks, both because this hits their morale and because I was secretly hoping to be able to hit fire arrows into the tar pits to ignite them. But as you can see, the tar pits don't really do anything. You're lucky to kill 1 or 2 enemies with each burning tar pit, so not very important. On the left side, cavalry attacks have finally broken some of the enemy's skirmishers, and the enemy's main line fighting as my legionaries is starting to lose morale as well. The battle is pretty much over at this stage. We just attacked the remaining enemy units in the rear. We had so many units freed up by the few routes going on that we were free to surround the enemy, and you can see the enemy start mass routing as we pursue them off the hill. Decisive victory, a relatively easy one for Eustchus in his first major battle, the terrain giving him such a big advantage that actually the enemy didn't manage to get a very good chance to attack us with their skirmishers. So well done, Eustchus. This battle means that we're probably going to be free to continue our plan to move west and attack Moradunum. We didn't lose any units or in enemy territory, so we won't take replenishment, but our losses are so minor in fact that we don't need it. We might be able to just rush right through. The enemy army, of course, totally devastated, including the death of their high-level general. We're going to release the captives we took, as is Eustchus's wont, and now, immediately after that, we're jumping into another battle where the garrison that Heraclides has surrounded is coming out to attack him, and this time the balance bar is really far in his favour, because of course they don't have the town's defences helping them out. Our army is in perfect condition, the enemy army is really levelled up, some of them with upgraded equipment, but overall, because these garrison units aren't particularly good, definitely not on the same calibre as my units, I'm expecting an extremely easy battle. So the enemy start the fight with an advantage according to the balance bar, but we'll soon see to that. Advancing with just massed infantry, their swordsmen in front, skirmishers behind, perfect. A skirmish is the last thing we want because Heraclides' army is actually very weak at range. So the enemy rushed up a hill towards me, coming to attack me just as I wished them to. I've got chariots and cavalry swinging around the enemy's flanks as they get close. So we're going to have plenty of opportunities to hit the enemy. The enemy have no cavalry, we have a massive mobile advantage, so there are going to be rear attacks aplenty in this battle, which is pretty much the reason why I'm so confident. These units aren't especially high in terms of morale, so rear attacks should take them out. So, the main part of the battle begins on my own terms. Then we run up the hill, waste their javelins throwing at their maximum range, get a little bit closer and have to run through javelin fire coming from my side, and now they're going to charge right into the front of pike phalanxes and of the legionaries' shield walls. All ideal. It's very unlikely that we're going to take losses in this fight. One or two lucky attacks by the enemy may kill some of my men, but my troops are so good and have so high defense stats, especially against frontal attacks, that the enemy aren't going to be able to make a dent in my line charging like this, especially because they're charging uphill, and of course because they're taking javelins the entire time. Some of the javelins actually hitting my own men, because not being thrown particularly accurately, but killing more of the enemy than my own, so it's fine. They even left a good number of units on the left side not engaged, so we can immediately start snaking around to strategically outflank the enemy. Meanwhile, behind them, I've got cavalry and chariots set up to attack the enemy. They are reacting kind of well. They've got a few reserve spears chasing my cav, but it's not going to help. We're too fast. We're going to get plenty of chances to slam into these slingers, and these slingers are not like the skirmishers that have been annoying me so much. They are straight up terrible in melee, and these hits by the fast heavy units are able to damage them and rout them relatively fast. So that means, as you might imagine, this battle didn't last all that much longer. Here you can see I released the dogs into the back of some of the enemy's units, and this is going to cause disarray among them. The units will rout because this is a rear attack, of course, and now the dogs will absolutely annihilate them as they attempt to rout, so I can just free up even more units to go and surround the rest of the enemy's troops. Even hitting them with cavalry as well there, just to make it even worse for them. So, not really much left to this battle. A chariot attack in the centre is what does the decisive blow. The chariots rush through an enemy unit, not really doing any damage, but when they hit the back of the enemy's lines, multiple units rout at once, and that causes a chain rout all along the line. They did not like being pressed against the pike phalanx by the chariots from behind. So, the battle is over almost as soon as it began, in a heroic victory for Heraclides. We lost virtually no troops, the enemy army taking devastating losses, especially because I chased them through the rout. So this means there's a very good chance we're going to take some Iceni territory in the next episode. The two outright defeats in the spring of 209 were blows from which the Iceni could not recover. They had been the most prepared of all Massalia's enemies, with the most able warriors of northern Europe at their command, and still they had been overcome in a few months of war. The message to the rest of Massalia's clients and allies in the region was clear. No one can resist the will of the world's foremost city. The message was heard by many within the Republic as well. It was starting to become obvious that the Timucoi were going to get their way in any matter of importance, and that the Regional Council of Rulers was not going to be listened to when it came to military matters. It was now not uncommon for men to fear the Republic watching over them.